This is Andrew from My Credit Counselor, and I want to talk to you a little bit about traditional, or what I call old school, debt settlement, and why I think it's ineffective, what you can do if you are in a situation where you need to settle a debt, and to avoid falling for some of the pitfalls and traps that we see in traditional debt settlement. So before I start with that, just a little background info on me. I started working in the debt settlement industry for an old school, traditional type of debt relief company in 2009, and I became their lead negotiator. Ended up settling about $500,000 in credit card debt within my first 3 or 4 months, and then went on to start my own business after that, and that's how most of you know me today. But I also do consulting projects from time to time with different companies in the debt relief space. I recently did one this last year with a large payment processing company for debt settlement. So pretty well connected. I know a lot of the main actors, and I know very well how that industry operates. And what you have to look out for is that the biggest pitfall or the biggest drawback of traditional debt settlement is that they market it to people who are not a good fit for debt settlement. And what do I mean by that? So to be a good fit for debt settlement, in my opinion, you have to have funds to settle, and you want to be able to settle pretty quickly after you get into default or whenever you decide to take action, because the longer you wait, the greater likelihood there is of a legal action or a lawsuit, and the longer your credit stays in the tank. So one of the other misconceptions about debt settlement is that it ruins your credit. And the funny thing is, the actual settlement itself, when it's a zero balance reported to the credit bureaus, is when your score starts to go back up. So it's the late payments, it's the default itself, and keeping the accounts in default and not settling them for years and years and years like most debt settlement companies do. That's why there's the idea going around that settlement ruins your credit, permanently. So with these traditional debt settlement companies, what they're going to really market to you is a lower monthly payment. Now, this doesn't really mean anything for the overall reduction of your debt or your settlement of your debts. But it's a prescient marketing point where they can say, hey, you pay $600 to $700 a month now on your multiple credit cards. You can just pay us $350 a month. We'll hold it in an account, and when you save up enough, we'll start to settle your accounts. Well, the problem is when they give you a lower payment, you're paying into that savings account with that debt settlement company for a long time before they can even make an offer to any of your creditors. So they can't negotiate before you have funds saved up, because each lender and each debt collector, they want their funds that month, the month that you start negotiating, or the month after at the most. And you don't want to wait too long, because then it can go to a law firm if you are kind of stalled out in negotiations. So because they're marketing this lower payment to you, you're thinking, wow, I'm getting a lower payment, and then I'm going to stop, making my normal payments to my credit card companies, or my unsecured debts, or my private student loans, whatever it is. So you think you're kind of swapping out one payment for another, but it's really not the case. That's just the arbitrary amount that the debt settlement company is charging you to put into your account, and they're going to take their fees out of that as well. They're not supposed to do that until you actually get the settlement for each individual account, but that's been a problematic thing in the industry, and it still is a problem today. But that's the other thing as far as another big negative of traditional debt settlement. They charge just a ton compared to a performance-based negotiator like me. So you're typically going to pay 25% of your total balance enrolled in traditional debt settlement, and not a percentage of the savings. So no matter how good of a job they do, no matter how good the settlements are, or how bad they are, they're getting paid a fourth of your total debt amount, which is a massive amount when you're settling for maybe 50% of the balance on most accounts, maybe a little bit lower. So they're taking those fees out over time, so it's not like you're coming up with that all at once, so it seems less painful. But you're really paying a massive amount more in fees than you would with a more, I would say, advanced debt settlement model, a model that's better fit for today's era. So with debt settlement, with traditional old school debt settlement, you're going to pay into an account for many, many months. The typical programs are like 4 to 5 years. And people get sued often in those programs. And sometimes the debt settlement company will have a law firm they'll refer you out to try to defend the account. In a lot of cases, they don't. But even if they get you an attorney or they get a law firm to represent you, the problem of not having the settlement funds in time is still there. So settlement is not a good fit for somebody that does not have any funds to settle or can just pay a few $100 a month towards a settlement over time. Now, I know that some people inevitably are going to just fall behind on their payments because they can't afford them. And if that's the case, then you can take a wait and see approach and try to play defense in different ways, like maybe setting up a temporary payment plan while you're trying to save up for settlement for that account. But you don't need to have a debt settlement company involved at that point. You only need to have them involved when you have funds to settle. So that's the big drawback to traditional old school debt settlement. That's why you hear about just the idea that settlement destroys your credit, that you're going to get sued if you go into debt settlement. That's why it's the old school model. So what's the new model? The new model is, at least the way that I do it, is I take on people that have funds to settle for either a lump sum or a structured settlement. And a structured settlement is a down payment and then fixed payments over time on the settlement, not into some savings account with a debt settlement company. You're paying the creditor directly. They're agreeing to the structured settlement, and they're not going to come after you or add interest or fees or anything while you're in that structured settlement period. Those are typically 1 to maybe 4 years, with 1 to 2 years being the kind of the average length of a structured settlement. So people have to have funds to settle right away when they default. And the whole idea is to minimize the risk, minimize the amount of time that your credit's in the tank, and maximize your savings. So a lot of my clients, they're going to be back into a good credit score range within maybe 6 to 12 months after their settlement's done, because we're not letting it sit there for 3 or 4 years. And we're settling it as soon as it gets into default, or maybe a couple months after. Now, I do have people contact me that have been in default for longer than that, and that's fine, being proactive and reaching out at that point to settle. But even for them, it's like, well, we're going to settle in the next month or two if you have the funds, and your credit's going to start going back up if that's your only account in default. So that's just some of the differences between old school traditional debt settlement, which I think is marketed to way more people than are actually a good fit for it, and the actual model of performance-based debt settlement in 2022.